When Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE, Egypt was already a fading power. Once the heart of pharaohs and pyramids, it was now a fragile kingdom, surviving only through its wealth and alliances. Cleopatra grew up in Alexandria, a city of marble temples and scholars. The great library still stood, though its glory was dimming. It held hundreds of thousands of scrolls, knowledge from across the world. As a child, Cleopatra spent time there, soaking it up. She was a bright child, trained in politics, languages, and diplomacy. She learned Greek, of course, but also Latin, Aramaic, and more. Unlike her ancestors, she learned to speak Egyptian, a small decision that later made her stand out among foreign rulers. The people saw her as one of them, not just a Greek outsider. Her father, Ptolemy XII, was not a strong king. He loved music and parties more than ruling. The Egyptians called him Auletes, the flute player. In 58 BCE, when Cleopatra was about 11, the people of Alexandria rose up against him. They were tired of high taxes and Roman interference. Ptolemy XII fled to Rome begging for help. Cleopatra went with him into exile. It was a hard time, living as refugees, depending on Roman senators who demanded bribes. Ptolemy paid them with Egypt's gold, promising more if they helped him return. They did. Roman troops put him back on the throne in 55 BCE. But the price was heavy. Egypt now owed Rome enormous debts, millions in silver. The kingdom's farms and temples were taxed harder than ever. When Ptolemy XII died in 51 BCE, Rome sent a will, saying she and her brother had to rule together. It was the start of her real fight. Cleopatra, only 18, was made co-ruler with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. But behind palace doors, advisors controlled the boy king, plotting to remove Cleopatra from power. These men were eunuchs and priests, loyal to the old ways. They saw Cleopatra as too ambitious, too close to the people. She started making changes right away, visiting farms along the Nile, listening to complaints, and adjusting taxes. She presented herself as Isis, the goddess of motherhood and magic, to win the Egyptians' hearts. For a while, it worked, but the advisors struck back. They convinced Ptolemy XIII that his sister was stealing his power. They forced her out of Alexandria. Her portraits were removed from coins, her name erased from decrees. Temples no longer mentioned her in prayers. She fled east to the border with Syria, gathering an army from loyal allies near Syria. These were mercenaries and local tribes who saw her as the true heir. For months, the Nile Delta trembled under the threat of civil war. Skirmishes broke out, soldiers clashing in the marshes, supply lines cut. Cleopatra camped in the desert, planning her return. She sent spies into the city, bribed officials. But her brother's forces were strong, backed by the palace guard. Then in 48 BCE, something unexpected happened. A Roman general named Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, chasing his rival Pompey. Pompey had lost a civil war in Rome and fled to Egypt for help. Ptolemy XIII's advisors thought they could win Caesar over. They killed Pompey and presented his head to Caesar. It backfired. Caesar hated the act. For Cleopatra, this was her moment. Cleopatra snuck back into Alexandria one night. The city was under lockdown, guards everywhere. She had herself wrapped in a large carpet and carried right into Caesar's quarters by a loyal servant named Apollodorus. It was risky. If caught, she could be killed. When the carpet was unrolled, there she stood, confident, dressed as a queen with makeup and jewels intact. She was 21, poised and eloquent. Caesar was surprised, but impressed. At 21, Cleopatra was smart and spoke multiple languages, including Latin, which few Egyptians did. She knew Roman history and politics. She didn't ask for pity. She offered a deal. Help her win back the throne, and Egypt's riches would support Rome.
Egypt produced grain that fed Rome's millions. In return for power, she could ensure steady supplies and pay off debts. Caesar saw the value. He was dealing with his own enemies back home after beating Pompey. An alliance with Egypt's grain supplies could give him an edge in Rome's civil wars. He agreed to hear her case. But Ptolemy XIII's advisors panicked when they learned she was in the palace. They declared war on Caesar, trapping him in the palace with a small force of 4,000 men. The fighting spread through the streets. Fires burned parts of the city, including some of the Great Library. Warehouses of scrolls caught fire, destroying priceless knowledge. Cleopatra stayed by Caesar's side during the siege, directing her supporters and keeping supply lines open. She used her knowledge of the city to sneak in food and messages. Her presence boosted morale among the Egyptian troops who switched sides. Caesar respected her strategy. The siege lasted months, from late 48 BCE into 47 BCE. Caesar's men held the palace while Ptolemy's army attacked from the city and sea. The Romans built barricades, fought house to house. At one point, Caesar had to swim from a burning ship to safety, holding documents above water. Reinforcements from Rome finally arrived, led by Mithridates of Pergamum. They marched overland, joining Caesar's forces. The turning point was a big naval battle in the harbor. Caesar's ships sank Ptolemy's fleet in flames. The boy king fled on a small boat, but it overloaded and sank in the Nile. With Ptolemy XIII dead, Caesar put Cleopatra back on the throne. She was now co-ruler with her even younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, but everyone knew she was in charge. At 22, she controlled Egypt. Coins now showed her face alone as a powerful queen, often with Isis symbols to connect with the people. But her bond with Caesar grew deeper. They became lovers during the siege. She visited him in Rome later, living in his villa across the Tiber. There, she learned Roman politics, met senators, and showed off Egyptian culture. It caused scandals. Romans saw her as a foreign temptress. In 47 BCE, back in Egypt, she gave birth to their son, Caesarion. Caesar publicly recognized the boy, a big deal for a Roman leader. It hinted at a new dynasty blending Rome and Egypt. Cleopatra used this to solidify her rule, presenting Caesarion as the future pharaoh. Caesar returned to Rome a hero after more victories, but his enemies plotted against him. He became dictator for life, which scared the senators. In 44 BCE, on the Ides of March, he was stabbed to death in the Senate by Brutus and others. They called it liberation from tyranny. Cleopatra was in Rome at the time, staying low. She heard the news and fled back to Egypt with Caesarion, fearing for their lives. Rome split into factions after Caesar's death. His will named Octavian, his grandnephew, as heir. But Antonio, Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, took charge first. They divided the empire. Antony got the eastern provinces, including oversight of Egypt. He needed money for wars, so in 41 BCE, he summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus in modern Turkey to prove her loyalty and pay up. Cleopatra didn't go begging. She arrived in style, on a golden barge with purple sails rowed by silver oars, dressed as the goddess Venus. Musicians played harps, and the air smelled of perfume from burning incense. Boys fanned her with feathers. It was theater, designed to wow Antony.
He was charmed. Antony was a strong general who loved life, battles by day, feasts by night. They became lovers and partners that very trip. Cleopatra bore him twins in 40 BCE, Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. Antony helped her expand Egypt's borders, giving her lands in Syria, Cyprus and Lebanon, old Ptolemaic territories. In return, she funded his wars against Parthia, supplying troops and cash. It was a win-win. But Octavian, back in Rome, grew jealous. He saw Antony getting too Eastern, too tied to Cleopatra. By 37 BCE, Cleopatra and Antony were married in Egyptian rites, though Antony had a Roman wife. It didn't matter in Alexandria. She had another son with him, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Their family symbolized a blended empire. In 34 BCE, after Antony's partial victory over Parthia, he held a huge ceremony in Alexandria, the Donations of Alexandria. He declared Cleopatra Queen of Kings. Her children got titles over vast territories. It was a bold move, creating a new Eastern Empire with Alexandria at the center, not Rome. Cleopatra dressed her kids in royal costumes from the lands they ruled. The crowd cheered, but Rome was furious. Octavian, controlling the West, spread rumors. Cleopatra was a seductress, turning Antony against Rome, making him drink and forget his duties. He read Antony's will in the Senate, claiming it left Roman lands to Cleopatra's children. True or not, it worked. Romans saw her as a threat. Tensions built. In 32 BCE, Octavian declared war, not on Antony, to avoid civil war labels, but on Cleopatra, the foreign queen. Antony's supporters in Rome defected, calling him a traitor. The stage was set for a final showdown. Cleopatra prepared Egypt's fleet and army, melting temple gold for coins to pay soldiers. She and Antony gathered forces in Greece at Ephesus, then Patras, facing Octavian's navy led by Agrippa. They had 500 ships, but many were big and slow, loaded with treasures. Antony and Cleopatra's ships outnumbered Octavian's 400 to 250. But Octavian's were smaller, faster, and better crewed. The fight started well for Antony, with heavy galleys ramming enemies, but as the day wore on, confusion spread in the lines. Winds changed. Antony saw her sails turn and followed in his own ship, abandoning his men mid-battle. It looked like a rout to the troops. Many surrendered. Octavian won easily. In Alexandria, defeat hit hard. Antony's troops deserted, switching to Octavian for pardons. Cleopatra tried diplomacy, sending gifts and offers to retire if her children ruled, but Octavian wanted total control. In 30 BCE, he invaded Egypt from Syria and Libya. Antony fought one last battle outside Alexandria, but lost when his cavalry defected. Thinking Cleopatra had betrayed him or was dead from false reports, he stabbed himself in the stomach. Servants carried him to her mausoleum, where she hid. He died in her arms, begging forgiveness. In her mausoleum, surrounded by treasures and loyal maids, she ended her life, likely with poison hidden in a hairpin or drink, though Roman stories say an asp bite for dramatic effect. Her maids followed suit. She was 39. Octavian found her body, dressed in royal robes. He allowed a joint burial with Antony. Egypt became a Roman province, its wealth flowing to Rome. Her reign was over, but her story became legend. A queen who rose through wit and will, charming empires. She showed how one person could challenge the world, but also how power's grasp can slip away.